I'm 87 years old. One conversation changed every single thing I thought I understood about life, and I spent the 35 years before it completely certain I already knew what mattered. I was wrong, and by the time I found out, I'd already missed more than I'll ever be able to count. I was 40 years old, sitting across from a man named Don Reeves in a conference room in downtown Chicago. Don was 71. He'd built a real estate empire from nothing, made more money than either of us could spend in 3 lifetimes, and he was there to sell it all. We were representing the buyers. The deal was worth $340 million. It was the biggest moment of my career up to that point, and I remember thinking, as we shook hands before the meeting started, that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then Don said something that I smiled at and immediately forgot. He said, "You know what I'd give to be 40 again? Not for the money, not for the deals. I'd give it all just to sit at a kitchen table one more time with my kids when they were still little." I nodded. I said something polished like, "That's a beautiful thought, Don." And then I moved on to the first agenda item. I was a corporate attorney, mergers and acquisitions. I was on my way to making partner, which I did at 45. I was billing 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I was traveling 40% of the time. I had a wife named Linda and 2 kids at home, Sarah and Michael. And I told myself the story that every man in my position tells himself, that I was doing it for them, that the sacrifice was love in another form. I believed that completely. I believed it the way you believe the sun rises in the east. It wasn't even a question. And the people around me reinforced it constantly. My partners, my clients, the whole culture I lived inside. Success meant hours. Hours meant commitment. Commitment meant worth. Nobody in that world ever pulled you aside and said, "Hey, you're missing your life." They threw you a party when you made partner and handed you a bigger billing target. So I kept going. Sarah was 13 when I missed her school play because I was in New York closing a deal. I remember Linda telling me about it on the phone. I remember saying I was sorry and meeting it for about 4 minutes before the next call came in. Sarah doesn't talk about that anymore, but I know she remembers. She was 13, of course she remembers. Michael was 10 when I coached his Little League team for exactly 1 season, and then quit, because the schedule conflicted with a client in Dallas 1 season. He finished that year with a different coach, a guy named Gary who sold insurance and showed up to every single game. Gary, who was not his father. Gary, who had time. Linda and I, for about 20 years of our marriage, were what I'd describe now as roommates with a mortgage. We talked about schedules, about bills, about the kids' logistics. We were professional about being married. I thought that was fine. I thought that was what marriage looked like after the early years wore off. I had no idea I was living next to a person I barely knew. I didn't see any of this clearly at the time. That's the part that still gets me. I was intelligent. I could read a 200-page contract and find the 3 lines that mattered. But I couldn't read what was happening in my own house. The thing about living a lie is that it doesn't feel like a lie from the inside. It feels like your life. Then I was 52. I was in a client meeting in San Francisco, a Thursday afternoon in October, and my chest started hurting in a way I'd never felt before. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was the flight. I kept talking for 6 more minutes before my assistant called 911 because she could see something I couldn't. Triple bypass surgery, 6 months of recovery. And the first 3 months, I'm not proud to say, I spent arguing with my cardiologist about when I could get back to work. It took me until month 4 to stop running long enough to actually look at my life. And what I saw was this. I was 52 years old. I had a 12-year-old marriage that had gone quiet somewhere around year 10 and I hadn't noticed. I had a daughter who was 25 and politely distant, in that way that adult children are when they've learned not to expect too much from you. I had a son who was 22 and already starting to work the same hours I worked, and I thought at the time that was something to be proud of. My father had died at 71. A heart attack, same as me, but earlier, a few years earlier. I was 45 when he died, and I remember standing at his funeral thinking we never had the real conversation. The one where we actually said what we meant. Where I asked him what he regretted, where he told me what he wished he'd done differently. We never had it. The closest we got was a handshake. My mother died at 68. Cancer? I was 42. I did not visit as much as I should have in her final years. She was in Phoenix, I was busy. I told myself she understood. She's been gone 45 years. I've had 19 years on this earth that she never got. 19 years. I spent the first decade of those 19 years billing client hours instead of calling her back in time. Here's what I know now that I could not have told you at 40. A conversation changes things in ways that promotions never can. Achievements don't compound. Relationships do. I made partner at 45. Nobody in my life talks about that anymore, not even me. But my daughter Sarah calls me every single day to check on me. Every day. That is the result of work we did together for 30 years after I almost lost her. That compounds. That's what's left. Presence is not the same as proximity. I was in the same house as my children. I drove them to school sometimes. I was physically there a lot of the time. But being in the room while your mind is somewhere else is not the same as actually being there. Your kids know the difference. They always know. The people who love you most will wait the longest for you. And that's the trap. Linda waited. Sarah waited. Michael waited. They kept adjusting, kept understanding, kept giving me one more chance. Their patience cost me decades of clarity. If they'd stopped waiting earlier, I might have woken up sooner. Don Reeves said something to me in that conference room, and I let it bounce off me like it had nothing to do with me. But it had everything to do with me. He was standing at the end of his road looking back, and I was in the middle of mine, and I nodded and moved on to the agenda. That's the mistake, not the working, not the ambition, the not stopping, the not letting something true land. After the heart attack, Linda and I started over in a way I didn't think was possible at 52. We went to therapy. We learned how to talk to each other like we actually meant it. We traveled. We fought about real things instead of scheduling conflicts. We laughed more in the 10 years after my heart attack than in the 20 years before it. She passed 7 years ago at 78, pancreatic cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to the end. I was with her every day. I held her hand. I said everything I had to say. I still topped her photo every morning at 5:30. I still wear the ring. And the thing I'm most grateful for in my entire 87 years of living is that I changed before I lost her, not after, before. Because here's what the math looks like from where I'm standing. I have 5 grandchildren. My grandson Josh is 23 and in law school right now, and I watch him and I see myself at 23 absolutely certain that the career is the point. That if you just get the right position and bill the right hours and make the right moves, the rest will follow. I love Josh more than I can say, and I am terrified for him. My son Michael quit investment banking at 35 to become a high school teacher. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought he was throwing away his potential. I thought potential meant income. Michael retired at 55. I retired at 67. Michael has had 12 more years of freedom than I did. I was wrong about Michael. He saw what I couldn't. Here is what I would do differently if I were 40 again, sitting in that conference room when Don Reeves told me what actually mattered. I would stop. I would put down the agenda. I would say, tell me more about that. I would treat that moment like the $340 million deal instead of the other way around. At 35, I would have started protecting time the way I protected billable hours. I would have treated a Saturday morning with my kids as non-negotiable, not when work allowed it, not as the reward after the deal closed, as the thing you built everything else around. At 45, when I made partner, I would have looked at what it cost and asked whether it was worth it. Not in the proud way I actually did it, in the honest way. I would have called my mother more. I would have had the real conversation with my father before he died. I would have asked Linda every year what she needed from me that she wasn't getting. Not assumed I already knew. So here's what I'm asking you to do this week. Not someday. This week. Call the person you've been meaning to call and have the conversation you keep putting off. Not the easy version of it, the real one. Ask them what they actually need from you. Ask them what they remember about the times you weren't there. Let the answer land. Write down 3 moments in the last month where you chose the work over the person. Not to judge yourself, just to see clearly. Ask yourself, if I found out tomorrow that I had 10 years left, what would I stop doing? What would I refuse to miss? Why are you waiting for that news to start? Are you making my mistake right now? Are you in the conference room, nodding at something true and moving to the next agenda item? Are you billing the hours and calling it love? What are you sacrificing this week that you're going to want back in 30 years? How much time do you think you have? I'm 87 years old. I heard the truth at 40, and it took a near-fatal heart attack at 52 to make me actually listen. That's 12 years I handed away. 12 years where I could have been present and chose productivity instead. 12 years of Sarah's life, of Michael's life, of Linda's life that I processed from a distance. I have great-grandchildren now. Ava is 3 years old. Lucas just turned 1. When I hold them, I feel the whole length of a life in my hands. I feel how fast it goes. I feel what Don Reeves was trying to tell me. One conversation in your 40s can change everything. The question is whether you let it. I'm 87. Linda has been gone 7 years, and I would trade every dollar I ever billed for one more morning at the kitchen table with her. I got 35 years of a real marriage. After I stopped running, I almost didn't get any. You are learning this now. Whatever age you are learning it earlier than I did. Don't move to the next agenda item. Put it down. Turn toward what matters. The deal will still be there in an hour. The moment won't.